Thanks for joining us online. Stay tuned for the weekly teaching at the Sanctuary.
Thanks, guys. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, I'm back. Don't clap yet. Don't clap yet. No, it's great to come back here and to be with you guys. It's been a month away with some hockey injury, but it's been really encouraging to be able to kind of sit on the sidelines and watch as we've had like Hans Ostrom and Saba and others come and speak. And it's just been incredible for me to have that peace of mind and knowing that they understand the community and the culture of the sanctuary, and they're going to come and they're going to continue to help us learn and grow into what we're trying to do and to learn more about who Jesus is. So it has been an honor, but I have to admit I have been missing it. I've had little tastes here and there of being on stage, and Denise gave me the privilege of singing a song with their incredible band last week at their concert, and I thought, boy, maybe I could sing more with the worship band, but then Dave said no. Dave said no way, so that's not going to happen. But I am very honored to be here with you guys back, and especially, many of you have walked with us for the last 3 years, from January to June, going through this book of John. And it's a bit of a milestone for me because the 4 years that I've been with you, that's the longest series that we've been to together. And today is the finale. We bring it to conclusion. And so I thank you guys for sticking with me on that. I hope it's been encouraging. I hope it's been challenging. And I hope you've grown in your understanding of who God is and how much He loves you. Well, we're going to bring it to the end today. And so I'm going to invite you as we continue. If you have our app, the Sanctuary app, you can go to the notes. So if you just click on the top there where it says community groups and message notes, you can follow along with everything that I'm saying today. And that might help you. If you don't have the app, you can find it on the App Store. You just have to search the Sanctuary Oakville, and it will be right there. And we should have Wi-Fi here to help you out. Next week, come back, we're going to start a new series, and it is actually called, here we are, The Biggest Butts of the Bible. So, yes, it is the biggest butts of the Bible, and come back, because I think you'll find that uplifting. There you are. Okay. Well, as we wrap up this series this week, I thought it's only fitting to go to the book of John and look where John reveals his purpose. He spends 21 chapters writing and sharing this biography about Jesus, as he spent day to day with this man, the Savior. And in chapter 20, so the penultimate chapter here, he kind of outs himself and reveals the purpose of why he documented everything that he witnessed. And we're going to start there. Verse 30 to 31. You can follow along on the screen here or on the app or in your own Bible. But follow with me. It's in the NLT version. And this is what John says. The disciples saw Jesus do many other amazing signs in addition to the ones I recorded in this book. But these things were written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in Him, you will have life by the power of His name. And so the title today of this final message in John is That You Believe, or That You May Believe. But the question attached to that title is this: what does it mean to believe in Jesus? Obviously, this is the purpose of John. This is why he wrote these 21 chapters. And as I looked at the passage this morning to wrap this up, I thought, what a beautiful passage. It so wonderfully lays out the understanding of what it means to believe in Jesus. And so that's what I'm going to address today. And again, I hope that no matter where you're at, wherever you are in your spiritual journey, whatever it is you believe, whatever worldview you hold to, I am thankful that you are here to be part of the discussion. And I hope that it's helpful for you. So, what does it mean to believe in Jesus? I think what I'd like to do is to start by painting a picture. And to me, it's a beautiful picture. For those of you who were here last week, you remember that Hans Ostrom started and taught on the first half of this chapter 21. And we remember what happened was the disciples were out fishing. So they're out on the water, and they were fishing, and they were having no luck. These were people that were career fishermen, and they were having no luck. They weren't catching a single fish. So They weren't helping their survival as their career, and they're also very, very hungry, investing all those hours on the water without any food. And this person from the beach yells out, essentially, "Hey, you're doing it all wrong. Put your nets on the other side." You don't do that in those days. But this person did, and so they probably begrudgingly did, thought they had nothing else to lose. And eventually they ended up catching a really good amount of fish. And it made them ponder, kind of look over there at the shore again as they're fishing, and you could hear one by one saying, "Wait, that kind of looks like Jesus. I think that's Jesus. I think it's Jesus." And before you know it, remember Hans said that Peter, the disciple, jumped into the water and he just power stroked back as if he was in the Olympics back. And then the other disciples helped put all the net with all the fish into the boat, and they got to the beach as quick as possible. And there, standing there to meet them, was Jesus. Now, why is this so significant? It's so significant because just days before, this person they had spent 3+ years following, living with, being taught, watching the signs, and seeing him lead a revolution. They watched him face trial, beaten, and killed. They saw the tomb sealed, and they went back to their old career of fishing. And yet here, as they came back to the beach, here was this person who said all along who he was, that he created everything, that he came to sacrifice his life so that you and I could be restored back into this amazing relationship with the Creator, because that's what we are always meant to be, what the purpose of why we were created. And they come face to face with someone who is risen from the dead, which was unbelievable. And I don't want you to lose the beauty of this. As they enter, as their feet hit the sand of the beach, they stand before the Creator of the universe, who has just laid out his life for them. And what is he doing? Verse 9 tells us, when they got to the beach, they found breakfast waiting for them. Fish cooking over a charcoal fire, and some bread. Here was the Creator of the universe, who had just risen as he had promised. And he is cooking his disciples, those who had turned away from him, who had given up hope, cooking them breakfast, caring for their needs. What an amazing God this is, where he never stops giving. He's always wanting to help us to meet our needs. And you know what? As I thought about this week, and I have to say, give a shout out to somebody. Somebody this past week had mentioned something along the lines of what a beautiful visual it is for Jesus to be on the shore. And I can't remember who they are because I have my concussion. So if it's you in the audience, I'm sorry that I can't give you the credit, but deal with it. But what really struck me as I was preparing this message this week was it really reminded me again of how the Bible often reveals the female characteristics of God. This motherly God that's always wanting to bring us close, to care for us, to meet our needs. You think about your mom, always there meeting your needs. And two quick verses or passages came to mind that really triggered this with the Creator of the universe on the beach preparing breakfast for the ones who loved him. And the first is, you can see it here in Isaiah 66, verse 13. Where it says, "As a mother comforts her child, so I will comfort you." That is speaking about the Creator of the universe, comparing himself to a mother, desiring to comfort his people. And the last one I want to share with you is, it just happened just before this passage, maybe days before the passage, when Jesus enters the city of Jerusalem. And he loves the people, and he knows the history, and he knows that they're supposed to be the light of the world, revealing the love of God to everyone. And yet he knows he's days, hours away from them betraying and killing him, an innocent person. And he says this in verse 37 of Matthew 23. "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills their prophets and stones God's messengers. How often I have wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. This is the creator of the universe saying, like a mother, I want to gather you. I want to protect you. I want to care for you and help meet your needs. Trust me because I love you. I care for the big things and the small things in your life. And so for John, as I was reading this message and understanding that his purpose is to write this book so that we may believe, I realized the first step in believing Jesus that leads us to true life is to accept the truth of who Jesus is and what he has done for us. You see, the creator of the universe shows time and time again, if you read the story of his life, if you look at the biographies of his life, time and time again he shows that the creator cares for your well-being. He cares for your physical needs. He cares for your emotional needs. He cares for your relationships. And of course, he cares for your spiritual needs. And I would argue everything is connected. Do you understand the message that John is trying to convey to us here? With Jesus on the beach and everything that he has done. Do you understand God's posture towards you and I? And that he is the one who constantly sacrifices and gives us everything. He never holds back. His posture towards you and I, those he created in his image to have life and to be in relationship, is to constantly give himself away and reveal himself so that you and I may have life. The question I have to always ask myself, even this week in prep, and I ask it to you too: what kind of God do you follow? What kind of God is it that you follow in your life? Is he or she a distant God, not really interested in what you do or what you experience or the troubles the grief that you experience in this life? Is he or she an angry God who always accuses you, who's a micromanager, always on the sidelines waiting to condemn you and to reveal what you've done wrong? Or is he or she perhaps a creation of our own dysfunctional relationship with our father or our mother? John, through 21 chapters, has shared with us that the Creator is for you, not against you. That he loves you. That he's chasing after you. That he wants to meet your needs because you matter that much to him. Well, as we continue, we look at verse 15. And I want you to pick up the visual again. They come to the shore. Jesus has prepared them a meal of fish and bread. I can imagine the conversation that must have been going on there. Like, wow, Jesus, you're alive. I can't believe this. I can't believe I'm part of something that will never happen again, but will change history forever. And then it says here in verse 15, after they've had their full, after breakfast, Jesus turns his attention to Peter and says, Simon was his original name. Jesus loved to give people nicknames. I love giving people nicknames too, but he called Simon Peter, which means rock. Simon, son of Peter, do you love me more than these? Picture this, Jesus sitting down eating this meal with his followers who had deserted him. And they're having this incredible conversation. He's answering questions. He's asking stuff about them. They're all gathered together around that crackling of the charcoal fire. And then he turns and he zooms in and focuses his attention across the fire to Peter. And he says, Peter, do you love me more than these? And this is the second thing that we need to understand if we want to believe in Jesus. First, we must accept who he is and what he has done for us, which I gladly accept. The second is we must begin to learn to love Jesus. If he is loving us constantly, telling us that we matter to him, Does it not make sense then that we ought to begin learning to love Jesus? You know, when we think about loving someone, we love someone with what? We love someone with our heart, we have to say our heart and our head. We love people with our emotions, but of course we also love people by thinking through this relationship and making decisions or making a covenant or committing to another person. It cannot be just one or the other. You know, sometimes we make that commitment to people, even when we know it may cause us great pain and anguish. Kind of like when I revealed my feelings to Krista, as you guys might remember. It didn't go so well. For those of you who are new here, I will share with you some of what I call the pause of death in my life. But I'd known Krista for 4 years. And then one day, all of a sudden, I looked at her different and realized that I was falling in love with her. And as I started to think more about her and knowing her good and her bad because we had been friends and spending more time with her with a bunch of friends who were away this weekend, I thought, I'd really like to try to work on committing to see if this could be it. If this could be the relationship, the lifelong relationship that I've desired, and hopefully she desires as well. And so my emotions were in play, and I was thinking all this through about commitment. And of course, I ended up getting up the nerve at the end of the weekend, and I never forget. I remember going. I seized my opportunity, and my emotions and my head were like, "Go, go, go! This is the time! No, no, don't do it! Don't do it! It's your no, go!" And I remember going there and saying, "Krista, this is really difficult for me to say, you know, and I'm going to put myself on the line here. I'm going to take a risk, okay? I'm going on a chance, but I think I'm falling in love with you." And nothing, this dead pause. And all I received was this, huh. Now, of course, my emotions were all strong and at play there, right? I was vulnerable. I pulled out my heart. But I thought this through as well. I'd used my head. Now, luckily, she said yes, hours later. And shortly after that, we went with her family and friends on a trip to Florida, which again, you know the bad side of that one, but we went to Florida. We went to Florida instead of going somewhere else. And I have to, I'm ashamed to admit it, but we were that couple. We were newly in love, and so the whole car ride down to Florida, the whole week we were there, we were all over each other like a wet blanket, right? We were kissing and holding hands and hugging every opportunity. We were inseparable, and I'm sure it was making everybody just want to vomit. I'm sure. Looking at her older brother, yeah, I'm sure. And now, to be fair, it really was Krista who was making more of the advances toward me. But you know, because I'd already know what it felt to be rejected in our early relationship, I didn't want to stop. But you know what we quickly learn, and I think everybody does in a relationship, whether it's a relationship when we're in love with someone, or whether it's a best friend, or whether it's a parent or a brother, we quickly learn that the physical or the emotional side of that relationship will not hold it together by itself, right? Both people are required to love each other through emotion, and like through their heart and their head, to make a commitment to go through the good and the bad, not just when hormones are off the charts. Now, Jesus said to Peter, "Do you love me? Do you love me more than these?" And so we are reminded that in order to believe in Jesus, we must learn to love Jesus back in return. Now, scholars differ on their opinion as to the meaning of Jesus' question here to Peter when he says, "Do you love me more than these?" Some believe that Jesus is saying to Peter, as they sit around the campfire with everyone still there, "Peter, do you love me more than you love the others around the campfire?" I want you to think about this for a minute. Jesus, 3+ years ago, had called this group of people together. And they spent every day, every night, essentially together. They became a family. They came from all different walks of life, but they learned to count on each other and to love each other. They became a tight family. Now, how many of you have ever experienced a difficult time in your life, an experience where it's been very challenging, but someone walked alongside of it with you, and both of you went together, and it created a strong bond? How many of you have you experienced that? Some of you. I've experienced that. And just before this passage this morning that we're looking at, we have to remember that when Jesus was killed, arrested, and thrown into the tomb, the authorities then went on a witch hunt looking for his followers, because they wanted to rid the world of this movement, this revolution of peace, and this message of a God that has come to love, and that he was more interested in relationships than religion. And if you remember, these followers of Jesus were hiding out together in various places around the city in fear of their lives. What does that do to people? It creates an incredible bond between people. They became family. And Jesus, some scholars argue, was saying to Peter, Peter, do you love me more than these people that became like family in your life? There's something that really hit me this week, and I wanted to share it with you, just a thought, and it's this. I thought, if I love God more than others, I will love others more. If I love a loving God more than others, I will love others more. It will allow me, it will equip me, it will change my heart to love others more. And so the obvious question that I struggled with this week as I prepared this, and I want to share with you, is this. If we are interested in believing in Jesus, do you love Christ more than your spouse, your children, your best friend, or fill in the blank? Last week, walking through a young couple through marriage counseling, as I normally do, and we were talking about the covenant of marriage, and how often in our society today, that covenant of giving and sacrifice for one another has changed to where, well, I'm going to marry someone that's really, the whole purpose of that person or my spouse is to help bring out the best of who I can be. And the moment that they stop doing that, I push them to the side and I look for someone else that can help me be. It becomes more of a selfish relationship. And this one person that I was counseling said, no, I get it. I don't buy that. I understand I'm committing fully, and I want to commit fully to my fiance. And at this point, they turned to their fiance and said, I love you more than anyone. And I'm committing to love you more than anyone always. Now, for those of us who are in a marriage, in a relationship, who wouldn't want to hear that? How beautiful is that? What a wonderful promise to hear from your significant other, to say, I love you more than anyone else, and I'm committing to love you more than anyone else. But do you know what their response was of their fiance? The fiance said, and it was such a great reminder for me, I'm glad that you love me more than anyone else, but you can't love me more than him. I'm glad you love me more than your parents, than your brothers. I'm glad you love me more than other people that you have relationships with, but you can't love me more than him, because he has to be the center of your life. And he has to be the center of our marriage so that we can remain strong. Do we love God more than we love others? Well, now scholars argue on this, and some say, well, that's not exactly what Jesus meant when he posed that question to Peter. And what he really meant, they say, is this: Peter, do you love me more than the others around this fire love me? Is your love for me greater than the rest of the family here? It sounds odd, doesn't it, that Jesus would ask that question, until we understand the context. For those of us who have read through the Gospels, the stories of Jesus, we know that Peter was quite a boaster. He loved to boast. He loved to elevate himself, to play himself as the hero, talking a good game, but he often disappointed himself and others. It reminded me, there's so many times in his life and relationship with Jesus when he spoke and then put his foot in his mouth and it was embarrassing, and he did it in public. But of course, there's that one significant moment that we remember when Jesus was telling his followers that in Mark 14, that they were going to, in his greatest moment of need when he was arrested, they were going to desert him. They were going to abandon him. And in verse 27 of Mark 14, if we put it up on the screen here, this is what it says. On the way, Jesus told them, "All of you will desert me." But Peter, right on time, says, "Even if all of these other people, even if the rest of the family deserts you, I never will." And Jesus looks at Peter, knowing him, and he says, "Peter, I tell you the truth. Unfortunately for you, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you're going to deny me 3 times. You're going to deny that you even know me." To which Peter again says no to Jesus. Emphatically, "Even if I have to die with you, Jesus, I will never deny you." Peter boasted. Peter had a high opinion of himself. It hit me. It reminded me as I was preparing this message, thinking about the times that I boast, thinking about the time that pride rises in my heart. It was this thought. Put it on the screen here. When we boast and elevate ourselves, we do so at the cost of others, don't we? Isn't that the truth? Think about it. When I boast, I'm saying I'm extraordinary. You can count on me more than others. I have a unique quality that others don't have. And Peter kept making these boasts, comparing himself to these group of followers that were committed to loving Jesus. They left their career. They gave everything. They gave up everything for him. When we boast and elevate ourselves, we do so at the cost of others. So here is this prideful Peter. And we know how the story went, right? That night when Jesus was arrested, Peter was in the courtyard. People came to him, "Hey, you're one of his followers, aren't you?" Remember, Peter's like, "Absolutely not." Second time, absolutely not. And he started to amp up the frustration and the hostility. Till the third time, he started cursing at them. "There's no way I know this person. There's no way." He saved his own neck for Jesus. And then I mentioned to you before, there was a coal fire that gives a unique smell. And Jesus had walked by. And so here, visualize this now as they're sitting together on the beach after eating breakfast, surrounded by the charcoal fire giving the smell. Peter is remembering his greatest moment of failure and shame. That, remember, he walked away and he broke down and he wept. And we read in the story here that he eventually then just kind of became disoriented, disheartened, and walked away from everything, even his followers, for a while. And yet Jesus, at the same time, when he smells that charcoal fire, would remember and have the flashback to that horrible night, the worst night in his life. So how did Peter respond to Jesus' question? "Peter, are you still going to tell me you love me more than the rest of these guys?" Look at his response. "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Peter had learned from his failure. He didn't say, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you more than these people. I've been telling you that for 3.5 years. He smelt the fire that triggered the reminder of his failure, and he finally realized, "I'm not all that." He spoke the truth in humility. And this leads me to the third understanding of what it means to believe in Jesus. Believing in Jesus requires a humble heart. It is a reminder that it is by grace alone that we are forgiven and loved by the Creator who made us in His image for true life. You see, what makes us the masterpiece that you and I are is the one who designed us in the first place. So to believe in him is to come before him with humbleness, not pride and arrogance. You know those moments when we bring our achievements before God and try to make an argument that or claim that we deserve his generosity? It doesn't cut it. God has done everything for us, and he wants us just to say, thank you. I receive it. I'm glad to be in the relationship with you. I am glad to accept that you've created me for purpose and meaning and significance, and to know that when my head hits the pillow every night, you love me. And that's a powerful message Jesus sends to all of us. That as he stood there publicly restoring Peter into the leadership of his group, publicly in front of people, Jesus reminds us, no matter what you've done, no matter what is in your closet, no matter what you and I will ever do, when we come to Jesus in humbleness, he always forgives. And he always picks us up and stands alongside us and says, we are good. That person, that woman, that man, that kid, you are forgiven. You are my family. I am with you. And he stands up for us when perhaps others do not. How often do we hear people in our culture admit when they're wrong? How often do we see on the news people presenting humility instead of pride and arrogance? There's this wonderful story of this Christian professor, Stuart Blackie, in the University of Edinburgh. And this one day, he was listening to his students present their oral readings. And then a young man stood up, and he began his recitation. And the professor noticed that he was holding his book in the wrong hand. The professor then interrupted the student and thundered, "Take your book in your right hand, young man, and be seated." The student sat down, and he raised his right arm to reveal he had no hand. And all through the audience in that class, you could feel the tension. The molecules in the room were changing. Been there? And there was a pause and a hesitation by the professor as he witnessed his grave mistake. After hesitation, the professor got up and began to walk down the aisles toward that student. He came to the student and he went and he put his arms around him. And with tears streaming down his face, he said to the student, I never knew about it. Will you please forgive me? Will you please forgive me? His humble apology made a lasting impact in the life of that young man. Fast forward 10 years later, in that same town, there was a meeting of Christ followers, and they're opening up and just, serving people and sharing about Jesus and the story of what Jesus has done for the world and how he loves people. And it just so happened on the final night, one of the speakers shared this story because they knew the professor. And they talked about that story and the need for humbleness. And guess who was in the crowd? It was that student from the professor many years ago. And he put his hand up and came forward. And he said, I was that man. And he raised his right arm to reveal it. He says, Professor Blackie led me to believe in Jesus and have a relationship with him, but it never would have happened if he hadn't have come to me in humility and made things right. We are called to come before God, our loving Creator, in humility, and we never know what that may do in the lives of others. And it leads me to my final point. To believe in Jesus comes with a mission. If I believe in Jesus, it comes with a mission. If you look at it, we see the mission here in this exchange between Peter and Jesus. Look what happens. Starting in verse 15. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, Peter replied. You know I love you. Jesus' response? Then feed my lambs. Verse 16. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Take care of my sheep. Again, a third time. Simon, son of John, do you love me? By the way, Peter obviously wasn't getting the significance. He was hurt that Jesus asked the question 3 times. Although, of course, the connection is the denial of Jesus 3 times and the reinstatement by the question 3 times. And Peter says, you know I love you. Look into my heart. You know that I love you. And Jesus again says, then feed my sheep. Do you remember Jesus often talking and comparing himself as the good shepherd? Back in those days, people understood, right? They understood caring for animals and farm life. There were many shepherds in the crowds that Jesus spoke to in those days. And Jesus talked to them and said, I am the good shepherd. And he would tell the story, and we know that. Remember that familiar story when he said, which one of you who is a shepherd, if you had 100 sheep and 99 of them came back to you with safety, but you discovered as you did the count that one wasn't back with you, one was in danger, one was missing, one could be in threat of a predator, or one could die, be lost, which one of you would not then risk your own life to go out and care and find the one who was missing? The priority of the good shepherd was the one who was missing, not the 99 who were safe. And it is a reminder for us that as Jesus says to Peter, if you believe in me and you love me, then you will care for my sheep. It is a reminder that God's heart is always tilted toward the hurting. I heard a speaker this week, and he was preaching on the story of the Good Shepherd, Andy Stanley, and he said that God always leans toward the disconnected. And it is true. God's heart always leans toward the wounded, the lonely, the one who does not know that they were made for an intimate relationship by a loving God. And to believe in Jesus, to truly believe and learn to love Jesus, is to develop the same heart as Jesus. Next slide, please. To care for the disconnected. To believe in Jesus is to develop the same heart that he has for the disconnected. And it comes with this wonderful promise in verse 19, where it talks about Peter's life after this and even his death. And Jesus says, there's a promise that if you do this, if you believe in me and you learn to love me and you come to me in humility and your heart begins to beat and care for the people who I care for, your life will bring God glory. And all those things that you look back on in shame will be buried and covered by the acts of godliness, by the transformation you have made in people's lives who are hurting, who are lonely, who are questioning purpose, dealing with tragedy. Your mistakes will be buried and covered, and no one will see them, and God will not see them, because your life has brought God glory when your heart beats like his. How do we apply this? Well, to believe in Christ and find real life requires accepting that he loves you and that he has proven it through his sacrifice on the cross, learning to love him above everyone else, developing a lifestyle of humility, and caring for the disconnected. I love what Saba did a couple weeks ago. It really reminded me of something that I stopped doing about a year ago when he asked us to do a hashtag of what we were going to commit more to, what was the next step that God was leading us to. And it reminded me of that Transform 52 where we said, if we just, every time we got together and we had this discussion, if we just took a moment and said every week one thing that God's speaking to me about that I need to change right now, if we actually applied that and we did 52 of these throughout the year, we would be a different person. We'd be a more loving person. We'd be a more godly person. We'd have more impact in our communities, helping people physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. So what is the one change that you need to make right now from what you've heard? I know what mine is. Let's pray.
Dear Lord, I thank you so much for this book. I thank you for the opportunity of going through this biography, going through and learning about you and what it must have been like for Jon to be an eyewitness to these things. Lord, I thank you that he wrote these down. I thank you that the message of 2,000 years ago of what you've done when you came and invaded this world in love, it continues to pulse through this world and pierce the hearts of people. Lord, let us be those people. Let us continue this tradition. Let us continue the revolution of love, of caring for people and looking at people through your eyes. Help us to be a community and a person of godly love and character, so that when people look at us, they know that we believe in you. Pray this in your name. Amen.
Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or prayers, contact us at thesanctuary.ca.